Good evening, everyone.
Kavod, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank you. Okay, here we go.
Kavod, we did Tet.
Okay, sounds good.
We did the Tour de Bet Yosef and Shulchan Aruch.
Okay, great. So we'll go to the next one. So it says here, Ve'im berach makom brakat hamotzi. Shakol niyeh b'dvar right. Okay, so I made a mistake, right, this guy. What did he do? Instead of making hamotzi, he made shakol. Or shama barich rachamana malka mared hai pita, right? Or he said the blessing in Aramaic. Right? Okay. So yatsa, so says the Torah, he fulfills the obligation, right? If he did that. So he brings here the Bit Yosef here, Perek Ketzad Mivrachim, right? Where's the source for this? In Mem Amud Aleph, in Masechet Brachot. The Perek Tanan, it learns over there in the Mishnah, Ala Kol Im Amar Shakol Niyam B'Dvar Yatsa. So there's a rule like this in blessings, right? That on any blessing, if you made Shakol, you filled your obligation. With Gemara, and then Gemara, it says there, it says there, Itmar Rav Huna Amar, it says Rav Huna said, Chutz minapat, except the bread, right? He excludes bread. Umina yain, and also the wine. Rabbi Yochanan Amar afilu patmian. But Rabbi Yochanan says no, even bread and wine also is included. Upasko poskim ki Rabbi Yochanan. So poskim, paskim like Rabbi Yochanan. Ve'amina too b'Gemara. Furthermore, they said in Gemara there, min yamin daya kerach rifta. So this rabbi, right? He ate some bread, whatever. Ve'amar barich mared dehapita. So he said in the blessing in Aramaic, right? Okay. Amar Rav Yatsa. So Rav says, "Oh yeah, I fulfill his obligation." Yeah. Amar Rav Kol bracha she'en ba izkat Hashem ena bracha. Right? But wait a second. Right? Gemara asked a question on that. Right? But didn't we say that any blessing which doesn't have the name of God is not called a blessing? So if that's the case, right, then how is this one working? So Gemara answers, "Amar barich rachamana mare dehai pita." So he answers that, oh yeah, wait, yeah, he said the name of God, but the thing is, he said it in Aramaic, right? That's why it works. Okay, so right, this is the source. And let's continue. So he says, so he says, ומשמע דוודאי דרבי יוחנן דאמר, כל ברכה שאין בה מלכות אינה ברכה. כמו שהתברר בסימן רי"ד, לא אמינן דאצה אלא. So he says that he comments the Bet Yosef here that according to Rabbi Yochanan, that he said, right, that also any blessing which doesn't have the kingdom is also not a blessing. Like we're going to say in chapter Reishu Dalid, which is 214, Lo minan diatzah. Then we're not going to say full obligation here, because after all, he didn't say the kingdom. אלא בדאמר בה נמי מלכות, ולפיכך כתב רבנו בריך רחמנא מלכה, right? And that's why, right, the truth is that he also said the kingdom there, right? He said malka, and malka in Aramaic means king. וכן כתבו הראש והרשב"א, that's what these rabbis said, ואף אגב דהי עובדא דמימין ראיה משמע דברכה שלאחר המזון הבאה. So he says, even though that from this story, it implies that this was like Birkat Hamazon we're talking about. Mashmad Rabbeinu, Tehu Adin Dein Berach Kach Ken Lifnei Hamazon. So, but the Torah understands that this also would apply if he said this before the meal as well. He would also fulfill his obligation there. שיצא ידי חופתו, מוציא דמי שינה מליטניה, התם ראה פת ואמר כמה נאה פת זה, ברוך מקום שבראה יצא. Right? So, in other words, the Gemara also says another thing, right, which is related to this, that the truth is, that if a person would say a language of a blessing, which is not the standard language, that would also suffice. So, pretty much, it's very flexible, this thing, right? You can do all kinds of variations and still fulfill obligation. Of course, this is only b'diavad, lechatchila, you should do it the way the rabbis made it. We don't want everybody improvising, making his own blessing, I mean, that's not really what they should be done. But we're saying, right, b'diavad, if they did that for some reason or another, so they did full obligation, so, they're in good standing, that's pretty much what we're saying. Okay. So then he says, another opinion, right, which is Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef argues with Rabbi Meir, right? He says, no, you have to do the standard language of the blessing, right? Otherwise, you don't fulfill your obligation. So we have two different opinions going on here. Okay, good. כתב ראש בירושלמי פסיק הלכה כרבי מאיר. So the Rosh says in Yerushalmi, paskins like Rabbi Meir, וגם לכאורה רבי יוחנן כרבי מאיר סביר ליה. So it's also, I think Rabbi Yochanan also holds like Rabbi Meir, אלא בתלמוד דחי, דחה, ואמר רבי יוחנן אמר לך, ענה דאמרי אפילו כרבי יוסף. But it says our Talmud, right, it deflects this notion and says that Rabbi Yochanan can tell you that I'm even holding like Rabbi Yossi, but Divrei Agaot Maimoniot Berosh Ilchot Brachot Kidivrei Rabbeinu. So it says this rabbi is also saying like the Tur. והגות השרי כתבו בשם התוספות שצריך עיון עם הלכה כרבי מאיר. So right there are some rabbis also say that we're not really sure if halacha is like Rabbi Meir. אפילו לא יזכיר פת, even if he doesn't mention the bread. וכן כתב גם כן על מרדכי. Mordechai also says that. וכן מועד הספיקה בדרבנן הוא יצא. So, right, it says Bit Yosef concludes, since it's a rabbinical doubt, he does fulfill his obligation. There you go. So in other words, we go lenient here. So what does that mean? That we can rely on Rabbi Meir's opinion that the avad, the chatchila, obviously we don't want things like this, of course. But otherwise we'll let you slide. Okay, good. So let's go to Shulchan Aruch, Yud. So so just to recap, right, what we said last time, um, we said in the Shulchan Aruch that im hu mesupak im berach hamotzit im lav, if there's a doubt whether he said hamotzi or not, he doesn't have to come back and bless again, right? So we said, what's the reason why? Because blessings are only rabbinical. So when there's a doubt, throw it out, right? And you don't have to say it again. Okay, that was last time. Now we're going to this one, right? The current one. So it says over here, "In b'makom birkat hamotzi berach she'akol niya b'dvaro." So what is he saying here? Instead of doing hamotzi, he did she'akol, right? Happens to the best of us. Right? Or Shamar, or right. Alternatively, he said, "Barich Rachamana Malka Mare Dehaipita." He said, "Yeah, blessed." Right. So I'll translate this. Right. This is Aramaic. So it says here, right? Blessed is God, who is the king of this pita. Right. Pita's bread. So Yatzar, he fulfills obligation. So even though this is like a very, not the standard language of the blessing, it's like Aramaic, right, dialect here going on. Nevertheless, it works, bediavad, right? Yeah. So there you go. Okay, good. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll go on to Yud Aleph. So let's go back there to the Bet Yosef. Let's see what's going on. It says here, ואם היו שניים או רבים, אחד מברך לכולם, ודווקא שישיבו שהוא דרך קבע, right? So another interesting thing, that we see here is that let's say you have a group of people, right, eating together. So what's better, that one should bless for everybody or everybody blesses for himself, hamotzi, right? So he says, right, that one blesses for everybody. This is the preferred method. So why is that? Because, when you do it in unison, as a group, it just it's more respectable like that. So that's the preferred method. Berov Am Hadat Melech, right? When you do it together as one group, you're honoring God like that, so that's a good thing. Um, so he says, but when we say that, that's when they, like sat down for a meal, it was like a group event there going on, right? Some kind of group meal. That's when we apply this kind of concept. Okay. So says Bet Yosef regarding that. בפרק כיצד מברכים, right? Where's the source for this? Also in ברכות מ"ב עמוד א', תנן, היו יושבים לכל כל אחד ואחד מברך לעצמו. So that's the thing, right? If, says the Mishnah there, if they're, each one is sitting by himself, right? So meaning what, they're not really coming as a group. They're all together in the room, but they're not. They didn't meant to. They didn't mean to eat together. Really, it wasn't like a group thing. So if that's the case, then each one blesses for himself. But if they're like having, like a group dinner, whatever, group meal, so then one blesses for everybody. This is the more proper way of doing things. And, right, that's what we do on Shabbat. The head of the household, right, blesses for everybody. That's a standard thing, everywhere, right? All the Jewish people, we do like that. Yeah. So when it comes to when it comes to kiddush, by the way, there are some Ashkenazi families, who like to do that. Like each member, does his own kiddush, right? Which is against what we're saying over here, not exactly just the opposite, right? The truth is that when it comes to kiddush, also the better way is that one should make kiddush for everybody, But for some reason, they like to do, each one separately. But that's not our custom, right? That's the Sfarim. We don't do like that, We never do like that. When you have a group, the group, Shabbat meal, whatever, we always do one kiddush for everybody. Sometimes when I go to Ashkenazi household, they tell me, "Oh, Rabbi, you want to make kiddush for yourself?" I'm like, "What for?" What do you? I'm with you together. They're like, "Oh, really?" Yeah, like they're surprised. That I tell them that. I was like, "What are you surprised about?" Well, that's the way it should be. Okay, whatever. Whatever. They have a custom like that. So yeah. So okay. So we'll see. By the way, maybe we'll see why they have this custom. What the source for this is. That they do it like that. Okay, Bezat Hashem. Maybe one day we'll get to that. Whenever, right? When the time comes. Maybe in the laws of Shabbat, maybe right, whatever, in the laws of whatever. We'll see what happens there. So anyway, right, let's move on. So Pirish Rashi explains regarding this, היו יושבים, right? בלא הסיבה, מיטות שמוטים על צידיהן, סמלית על המיטה, ואוכלים ושותים בסיבה. Right, so Rashi explains, right, that the Gemara here is talking about a certain kind of custom that today is not done at all, right? Which is that in those days, what they used to do was when they had a meal together with a group, they would like recline, on the couch, we have this reclining thing on Passover, that kind of thing. So they did that like that every night, that's the way it was in those days. So we don't do that. We don't sit on couches, we don't recline. We just sit, like straight up, right, erect, right, with a good erect posture, We don't recline, we don't do any of that stuff. So right, but that's the way it gauges, the issue of like, are they a group? Because if they are a group, in those days, that's the way it was. They would like all recline, on the couch, whatever, that was the culture in those days. Today we don't have that. Okay, whatever. So that's, so nowadays, it's just like if you came as a group, you meant to have a meal together as a group. So that would be like, equivalent to what they're saying, even though we don't do this kind of thing anymore. כל אחד מברך לעצמו, each one blesses for himself. Then keva seuda below hasiba, right? So he says, right, that what really makes it like into a group meal is, the reclining, right? We don't do that. כתב ראה, כן היה מנהגם כשמתחברים לאכול. So he explains, right, the Ra'ah over here. Right, who's the Ra'ah? Rabbi Aharon HaLevi. That's his name. And so it says here, that he said that was their custom in those days, as we said, right? That when they would get together to eat together as a group, right? Kol echad mesev al mitato. Each one is like reclining on his couch, you know? Well, that's the way it is. וכן לפי מנהגנו, עכשיו לאכול בשולחן אחד. Right, it says also, right, regarding our custom, that we all eat like, together on one table. או בלא שולחן, מפה אחד. Or, with one tablecloth, whatever. So he basically says, right, that that's the equivalent for us, to their reclining thing, the reclining, right, ritual that they used to do. Nowadays, what do we do? We don't recline. We just sit on table together. And that shows, right, that we are like a group of people, who want to eat together as a group. Okay. Sounds good to me. So then he moves on, וכתב הראש, רבינו חננאל פירש שהיו יושבים לעסק אחד, ונזדמן להם לאכול, מברך כל אחד לעצמו. Oh, so he explains it differently, right, this rabbi. Who was this rabbi again? This was, um, mm, right. So it's a Rosh who quotes Rabbeinu Hananel. So he says it like this. He describes it like this, right? He says that what this means. This reclining business. They would like or not reclining, right? What's the difference? So he says if they just sat together like in a group and they were doing some kind of an activity, whatever, and all of a sudden, they decided to eat, like, so it wasn't something that they planned to do to have a meal. It's like spontaneously all of a sudden, they got into a meal. So that happens sometimes. So if that's the case, so that they're not really, that wasn't their intention to come as a group to eat. So there, each one will bless for himself because they didn't come really as a group. But it says if their intention was really to eat, sit down to dine together as a group, so that's a different story, right? So then Echad Meferech will come. One will bless for everybody. ויש מפרשים, היו יושבים זה כאן וזה כאן. So it says, some explain that, each one would sit in his respective place. ושלא כסדר אכילה. So it wasn't like, organized, as a group thing, as a group event, right? הסיבו שישבו סביבות השולחן. But on the other hand, right, if they sat all together, like around the table, כמו וישבו לאכול לחם, right, ויסתחרו, פירוש רש"י עיקר דלכו לו קשה דתלמידי רב עד כאן שלום. So yeah, so right, basically it's telling you that, that's how we distinguish it. If they sat around together around one table, in an organized manner, so that's like a group meal. So then one will bless for everybody. But if it's just like haphazardly, each one sat in his own place, and all of a sudden, they like, they start to eat, whatever, right? The food came and they start to eat. So that's not really, a planned group meal. Not the same thing. Okay, interesting. Let's move on. וכן נראה שהוא דתם תוספות. So he says that's the way Tosfot says also. כתבו התוספות למתניתין מהרד בין ברכת המוציא וברכת המזון. So Tosfot says that this is referring to two things, right? One is the hamotzi at the beginning of the meal, at the outset, and also birkat hamazon at the end of the meal, right? Same thing, same concept. וכן כתבו רבנו יונה, also רבנו יונה וראש, רשב"א, וראש, the Rosh, right? All these Rishonim. כתבו מתניתין הרי בין בברכה ראשונה ובין בברכה אחרונה. They also said the same thing. Whether it's the beginning or the end, right? The same concept applies. בברכה ראשונה אפילו בשניים אחד מברך והשני יוצא. So he says when it comes to the Hamotzi blessing, if right even if there's like two people, one will bless, right, and the other one will fulfill obligation from him. So even two is considered to be like a group for this purpose. Doesn't matter. That's the custom, by the way. That's the way we do it. When you have like a group meal, even if you have just a couple, eating together, one will bless for both, right? Why not? Why shouldn't they? But as we said, right, that's when they plan to have like a group meal, like together, right? And that was their intention. It just wasn't some kind of haphazard kind of thing, something just it came together all of a sudden. Not like that. Okay, so we're almost done with this piece here. אבל אם לא הסיבו, אף אגב דשומע כהונה. So it says, but if they didn't, have like plans like that, whatever, even though the one who hears is like the one who answers, אפילו אמר amen, even if he said amen, לא יצא, he didn't fulfill obligation. ובשלושה, but when it's three people, he says, אחד מברך ברכת המזון לכולם. One is going to bless ברכת המזון for everybody. אם הסבו על המיטות, right? If they reclined on the couches, as we said, right? Okay, so that's not exactly, as we said, right? That's not exactly our custom to do things like this. We have a different format a little bit, right? But that's the right, but that's the ancient custom, right? That they had. Okay, whatever. So there's still more stuff here. We're gonna move on. So we'll go ahead. So מה שכתב רבנו היו שניים או רבים, right? And now what Shatur said that if you have like two people or more, ולא כתב סתם היו רבים, and he didn't write just regularly like this, like, group. משום דלעניין ברכת המזון, because when it comes to ברכת המזון, יש חילוק בין שניים ליותר, because there's a difference between two or more people, משניים, right, two or more, כשהם שניים, because when you have two people, כל אחד מברך לעצמו, each one's going to bless by himself. כשהם שלושה, when you have three people, אחד מברך לכולם, one is going to bless for everybody. כשהם שישה, what about when you have six people? הם נחלקים לשתי חברות. So then you can divide up into two groups, עד עשרה, until 10. אבל ברכת המוציא לא שנה. So when it comes to המוציא, there's no difference. אם הם שניים או שלושה. Doesn't matter whether there are two or three people. או יותר or more than that. בכל גברא אחד מברך לכולם. So in any case, one will bless for everybody. Okay, great. בתלמוד השני לן בין ברכת המוציא לברכת המזון. So it says, why do we differentiate between המוציא and ברכת המזון? בעניין זה, when it comes to this, התבאר בסימן קצ"ג, it says, we're going to explain that in chapter 193. זה לשון שיבול לקט, right? זה לשון שיבול לקט. אמר אביי, נקטינן שניים שאכלו, right, מצווה לחלק בפר. So it says Abai in the Paskins that when you have two people, right, to sit together to eat, so there is a mitzvah to separate. Here's Rashi explaining, what does that mean? Ben motzi ben b'kat hamazon. Whether it's motzi b'kat hamazon, v'chen pirish. So in other words, what it means to say is that when you have two people, right, better for each one to do by himself. The blessing. Rashi explains ben motzi ben b'kat hamazon v'chen pirish Rabbeinu Simcha. Right, that's how Rabbi Simcha also says. So it says some people don't have this custom. So they explain that since at the end of the Seudah, nifradim, they separate zemizem, one from the other. Lefichach mevorech kol echad le'atzmo. So therefore, each one will bless by himself. אבל תחילת הסעודה שיושבים בדעתם. But it says when it comes to the beginning of the meal, each one sits down, בדעתם להצטרף אחד יוצא, and their intention is to combine together, right, into one group. Right? אחד יוצא ברכת המוציא, one is going to fill the blessing on מוציא, אשר חברו from the other. ועוד פירש רבינו יוסף, also says this rabbi בשם רבי שמעון, name Rabbi Shimon. ברכת המזון דאורייתא, right? So ברכת המזון is from the Torah. אין אחד מהם יוצא בברכת חברו. So therefore one cannot fill the obligation of the other. So אבל ברכת המוציא, but it comes to המוציא דרבנן, which is rabbinical, לא אחמור כולי, they weren't so stringent like that. Let's see on the bit. Okay. Right, so you see from here an important point, right, that he's making here, which is that, Birkat HaMazon is from the Torah. So we're more stringent about that, but when it comes to Hamotzi, which is only rabbinical, we can be more lenient, right? So what does that mean, stringent, lenient? What's the point? When it comes to Birkat HaMazon, which is from the Torah, so each one should bless for himself, but when it comes to Hamotzi, which is rabbinical, so then we say, right, one blesses for everybody, as long as, they meant to be in a group, as we said. Okay, good. So we got a little bit more here. Let's go on. So it says, Rabbeinu, Amru Nechal Kan B'makom Ploni. If they said, right, yeah, let's eat here in a certain place, right, Sham Begimad Sebu in Lo Sebu Lo. So Gemara says, right, if they reclined, yes, they do together. If not, they don't do together, as we said. Or Minhu, and they contrast this with something else. It says, right, in the Braita, that 10 people were going on the road, even though they're all eating from one loaf of bread. Each one is going to bless by himself anyway. ישבו לאכול אף על פי שכל אחד ואחד ואוכל מכיכרו, so if they sat down to eat together, even though each one, right, is eating from his own loaf, אחד מברך לכולם, the one blesses for everybody. קטן ישבו אף על פי שלא הסיבו, right, so it teaches here that they sat down to eat even though they didn't recline. אמר רב נחמן בר יצחק, כגון דאמרי נזיל ונאכול נהמה בדרך פנן. So he answers, right, we're talking about a case here where they said, right, these people, they said, let's go and eat bread בדוכפלן, right? So what does that mean? כתב הראש, the Rosh says, ונראה דהו הדין נמי אם אמרו נאכל כאן שקבעו מקום. So right, yeah, so in other words, it means to say that let's eat in a group. So here also, right, if they said like that, let's eat here, בשביל שאלו היו אוכלים בדרך נקט תלמודה נזיל ונאכול. So it says, and because, right, they were eating on the road, that's why, right, the Talmud talked about this, we should go and eat. Nahama b'derech panan shekach minhag holchei derachim. So that was a custom of the travelers, right? They used to eat like that. Shekach minhag holchei derachim. Ad kan b'chen Rabbeinu Yonah says also Rabbeinu Yonah b'shem Ri Hazaken, name of this rabbi. Um, Rashi. So it seems like that was the intention of Rashi. Right, so right, yeah, derech plan means like beduch plan. It's a certain place. They kav'u lahem mitchila, and they set, right. They made plans to eat there. Makom bedibur, right, by speech. Ve'etza ve'azmana ave kviut. So he says that's called, like being together when they plan to be together. So like they're a group. אבל ישבו מעליהן במקום אחד. But it says if they just, like randomly sat, in one place, right? So there, yachad eno kaviyut. That's not called really, right, being a group together, even though they're eating together in one room. Okay, so we're done with that. So we'll go to the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, so let's see what it says there. So it says like this, right? Im hayu shenayim or rabim echad mevarech lekulam. If there's like two people or more, right, a group. So what happens is that one will bless for everybody, as we said, right? But dafka has sebu, right? That's only if they recline, right? In those days, they used to recline, as we said. Shehu derech keba. That's like, that means it's like something permanent. Or balabait in bnei beto de havek sebu. So it's also the same thing applies. If you have like a head of the household, in his house, right? They all sit together to eat as a family, whatever. אבל אם היו יושבים בלא הסלה, but if they were sitting, right, without reclining, whatever, כיוון שאינם נקבעים ביחד, since they're not really, one group, in a fixed manner, so then, כל אחד מברך לעצמו, each one will bless by himself. So, like a good example, that we had when I was in Israel was that, we, in the kollel that we learned there, kollel Maran, so we, had this like, cafeteria kind of thing, right? Dining room, whatever, So there, right, we would go to eat, and so we didn't go like as a group, to eat together. It just like we just happened to be, gathering all together in that room because that was a cafeteria. So kitchen, whatever, it was kitchen cafeteria kind of thing. So so each one would make his own blessing, because they were just like sitting randomly, down each one. So there was no reason for, one to bless for everybody. Each one is coming in, by himself. They happened to be together, yes, but they didn't come as a group. That's not the same thing, right? On the other hand, if there was times, where we would have like a planned meal, which is like assume somebody finished, some kind of a book. So he wanted to make a seudah, to commemorate right, that he finished the book, whatever, there's some sefer. Some Gemara, whatever it was. So there, right, then it was really like we were going to eat as a group, So then the one would bless for everybody because, that's the way it was. They were coming together as a group. Okay, so it really depends on the circumstances, we said, right? But we're not reclining on couches, as we said, right? Forget about that. That's history. Okay, right. Okay, so then he moves on. אבל אם היו יושבים בלא הסיבה, כיוון שאינם נקבעים יחד, כל אחד מברך לעצמו, ואם אמרו, נאכל כאן או במקום פלוני, right? Also, right, if they said, yeah, let's eat, in a certain place, they made like plans, כיוון שהכינו מקום לאכילתם, since they prepared the place to eat there, have a cave, that's also considered like, a fixed place, right? Whatever, group, אפילו בלא הסיבה, even if they didn't recline, right? We don't recline. שאין לנו רגילים בסיבה, so that's what he says right here in Shulchan Aruch. It says, nowadays we don't recline, who reclines, right? What are we talking about? ישיבה דידן בשולחן אחד, so he says, therefore, how do we gauge that, right? It's a group. that we sit around one table all together, or below shulchan mapachad, or with a tablecloth, or whatever. Have a kviyut. That's already considered like a group meal. There you go, right? אפילו לבני החבורה כסבת ידהו דבה. So he says even like people of a group, they're considered to be like reclining, the same thing. ודידן אפילו קבעו מקום לאכילתן. So it says by us, even if they planned, right, fix a place to eat, a certain place, or בעל הבית עם בני ביתו, right, or the family together sits down together to eat. לא מהנה אלא אם כן ישבו בשולחן אחד. So it has to be that they sat on one table, or במפה אחת, right, or one tablecloth, whatever, and right, then you know that we're talking about one, it's one group. So therefore, one will bless for everybody. Okay, that's the way it is. So let's see what's next on the menu here. Maybe we can knock off one more tonight. Let's see. Let's see if we can do it. Really not done. So it says here in the Bet Yosef, כתב רבנו יונה, says רבנו יונה, וכן אם היו רוכבים באמרו לאכל, right? So now he's talking about, like they're traveling, right? So each one is riding, right, on his right donkey, whatever it is, right? His horse, God knows, right? In those days. So, each one is on his own animal, riding, and they all sit together. Oh yeah, let's eat together. We're traveling together, so let's have a meal. נאכל אף על פי שכל אחד ואחד אוכל מכיכרו, so even though each one is eating from his own separate loaf of bread, they're not really sharing the loaf here. שלא ירדו מהמות מצטרפים, כיוון they do combine anyway. כיוון שעומדו במקום אחד, why is that? Because since they're in one place, right? Uh, they got together in one place, and they stopped in there to eat. אבל אם היו אוכלים והולכים, but he says, but if they're, just like, they kept on riding, right, and eating like that, they didn't stop to eat. No, then it's not considered to be like, they're together really. Each one is like, traveling. So even though they're traveling together, but the fact that they're moving, that already takes away the group effect over there. ואם היו אוכלים בשדה, מפוזרים, right? What about if they're, in like a field and like kind of scattered, all over the field there? ומפורדים, אף על פי שאוכלים כולם בשעה אחת, even though they're eating all together at the same time, right? מכיכר אחד, and also from one loaf, כיוון שלא קבעו מקום, since they didn't, fix that place, like they didn't plan that, ואוכלים מפוזרים, and they're eating like scattered, haphazard, אינם מצטרפים, they don't combine like that. So, then everybody will bless by himself. Okay, good. So we got a little bit more here. So then it goes on, רבנו, מה שכתב רבנו, בעל הבית עם בני ביתו, הווה שפיר קביעות, right? So then as we said, right, the head of the household with the family also, it's considered like a group. בירושלמי כתבו, it says in ירושלמי, in ברכות, right, שם, רבנו יונה, it says רבנו יונה והרשב"א, all these rabbis, אמר רבי יהושע בן לוי, בשבועה שמתניתין באורחין, אבל בעל הבית בתוך ביתו. So this rabbi said, what are we talking about here? Right, so it makes a differentiation here between a family eating together, right? Or, just um, with, some guests eating like haphazardly, whatever. רבנו יונה דסבא רבי יהושע בן לוי ובאורחים שדרך לתת לכל אחד ואחד מבני עצמו. So it says when it comes to the guests, right, like each one, gets separately, it's his own separate little portion there, right? Some kind of right, smorgasbord, whatever it is, right? ואינם יודעים קביעותם, and they don't know, right, that they're together, אינם מצטרפים, they don't combine, אלא כשהסיבו יחד מתחילה, unless they start together, at the outset. Right, from the outset. But he says when it comes to the right, head of the household with the family, even though they didn't sit together, um, from the beginning, they combine anyway. After the eating, because all the family members go after, right, the head of the household. Even though, right, Yerushalmi argues Rabbi Chia עליה ורבי יהושע בן לוי. He argues Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. כבר כתב רבנו יונה said, or he answered, שנראה דהלכה כרבי יהושע בן לוי. It seems like he says, הלכה זה כרבי יהושע בן לוי, וכן דעת הראש ורשב"א, also these rabbis say, same thing, שלא הביאו אלא דברי רבי יהושע בן לוי. They always brought that in period, opinion, I'm sorry, לבד. Okay, good. So let's move on a little bit more. So it says here, מה שכתב רבנו והנה שאיננו רגילים בשיבה, ישיבת דידן הווה קביעות. So as we said, right, nowadays we don't recline. So, the fact that we sat together is already like, group. כן כתוב שם תוספות, that's what it says in תוספות, ורבנו יונה, והראש והרשב"א, all these rabbis said like that, וכבר כתבתי בסמוך דברי הרעה. So they already wrote the words of the רעה regarding this issue. רבנו, ואפילו, מה שכתב רבנו, אפילו לבני אבור חבורה. So whatever the Torah said, right, that even for the people of the group, כלומר, לא מבעיה לבעל הבית, I don't need to tell you regarding the head of the household, אם בני ביתו, right, with his family, ישיבה הווה קביעות, that's considered like, one group there. תהה לדיד הוא נמי הווה קביעות. Because also by them, it's also like a fixed together group. אלא אפילו בני חבורה דלדיד הוא לא בקביעות. So it says even people who are the like they're just studying together, a group of people, right? So by them, it's not really they didn't really plan to have a meal together. The didan have a kaviyut, right? But it says for us, it's considered to be like together. So it says even nowadays, right? At least we do require one thing, which is that they have to be sitting down, not like standing, Miha by velo tema yeshiva ladinon keseba ledidu. So don't say, right, that our sitting is like they're reclining. V'chi hechi deledidu k'shekavu makom lachidatan. Just like by them, that when they fixed the place to eat, afal pi shelo esibu, even though they didn't recline having keva, it's considered like fixed. Ledidan afilu says by us also, lo yeshivu nami. Have a kiva. Even if they didn't sit, it's going to be also fixed. Hecha de leka yeshiva. When you don't have any sitting, leka kiva. It's not fixed. Umehai tama. So it says from this reason, nami nired the balabait in bnei beto. It seems like right, the head of the household with the family members. Nami lo have a kiva. It's not going to be really be fixed. Ela im ken yashvu, unless they sat down. So sitting down is a thing. It's a big thing. וכן נראה נימה שכתוב בסימן קע"ד, that's what it says also there, the chapter, it says, ופת דיין ויין, אין אחד פוטר את חברו. So it says, when it comes to bread and wine, right, one doesn't fully obligation to the other. You have to bless on both of them, right? That's what it means. אלא בשיבה, unless, right, unless they're reclining. So if they are reclining, so then one will do for everybody. But otherwise, not so. ודידן אפילו בשיבה, בשפשה, כל הזכרים, אפילו לדיד הוא אחד פוטר חברו. So he says, by us, even when they're sitting, and all the other issues, right, אפילו לדיד הוא, even by them, אחד פוטר אחד. So even according to them, right, one will fulfill the obligation of the other. Yeshiva lechud, right? Just by sitting. Kakatu b'ktzat nuschot. That's what it says in some of the right texts. Mashma de ben lididan ben lididu. So implies that whether it's for us or for them, b'shad dvarim by yeshiva. For other things, we require to sit. Mia mishum dechol below yeshiva la v'keva. Because when you don't sit, right, for sure, it's not considered to be fixed. It's not a group. Kilal. V'en echad poter et chavero. So therefore, one will not fulfill the obligation of the other. They'll have to each one bless by himself. Okay, good. So we'll do Shulchan Aruch and we're done, right? Let's see what we can glean out over here. So it says over here like this: "Im hayu rochavin ve'amru," as we said, right? If they were riding on the animals, each one, right, and they said, "Nochal, let's eat, let's eat." Right? Afa pi shekol echad ochel mikikero, even though each one is eating from his own loaf, shelo yardu be'amot, because they didn't really dislodge right from the animals; they're still sitting on top. Mistarfin, they still do combine anyway. Kivan shamdu b'makom echad. Since why? Because they stopped in one place, to eat. That's the whole thing. אבל אם היו אוכלים והולכים, but if they were like eating and going, just right, they didn't really stop. No, so then it doesn't work, right? It's not gonna, they're not really together in a group in that case. ואם היו אוכלים בשדה מפוזרים, what about if they're in the field, right? Each one scattered. אף על פי שאוכלים כולם בשעה אחת, so it says even though they're all eating together in one time, also from one loaf, כיוון שלא קבעו מקום, but it says nevertheless, since they didn't fix the place to eat there, just haphazard, right? ואוכלים מפוזרים, and they're scattered, all over the place, right? They don't combine like that. So, right, basically to sum it up, right? What's the bottom line? Bottom line is, that you have to have a group together, sitting in one place and eating, and then they do combine, right? And they plan to do so, right? They said, they're going to do like that, or physically, right? You see that they did that, But otherwise, right? If they just like, haphazardly, just walked into one place, and each one sitting, there, here, right, all over the place, right? In a scattered, whatever, right, formation. So then, right, they're not really together, these people. So therefore, each one will best by himself. Okay, very good. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Chazak Baruch. Laila Tov. We will see you tomorrow, Bezat Hashem, and we'll continue. And Hashem should give us good tidings, Bezat Hashem, right? Things should go our way. And we should do, the most important thing is we should do teshuvah, because, there are, as we see, right, there are some of our brethren, quote unquote, right, who need to do teshuvah. They're not behaving the proper way. And because of that, right, they were all suffering because of them, unfortunately, So that's the way it is, That's why all the big rabbis said, in our generation, the most important mitzvah for the Jewish people is education, to educate them in Torah. And then they won't do these foolish things anymore, behave like a fool, right? And then we won't have all these, issues that we have, right? That's what causes all the problems, So unfortunately, it's because of ignorance. We don't have Jewish education. This is the problem, That's what we're doing here together, right? We're getting together to educate, right, one another, so we can have more Torah. That's the only way to solve all the problems with Jewish people. Okay, we'll see you tomorrow, Brother Shem. Laila Tov.
Kavod Harav, thank you so much.
All the best.